Hello, my name is Tony. Boys' own style war movies tend not to be very literate or wordy. Why? Because they don't have to be. The primary focus is on the action, the thrills, the spectacle, pyrotechnics, familiar characterization, tropes, heroism and villainy. Escapism is the key element. Plot lines are simple, narrative generally unsophisticated, dialogue often hokey and sometimes jokey, good guys and bad guys easy to identify. The best of them hit the ground running and never look back until they reach the finish line. Think The Guns of Navarone, Where Eagles Dare, The Dirty Dozen, The Great Escape. There may be the odd twist and turn chucked in, a shock or two, surprise moments, a smattering of exposition, a vein of character development here and there, but for the most part it's a case of this is the deal, this is where we're going, full speed ahead James, and don't spare the hearses. Producer Ewan Lloyd wanted to make an all-star action-adventure flick like Where Eagles Dare. In 1977 he took an unpublished novel about mercenaries on a compromised mission to South Africa and put his money where his mouth was. His mouth was somewhere in the Swiss Alps, it seems, slapping everything he had behind a $10 million Anglo-Swiss co-production called The Wild Geese. And it did alright. It was one of the most popular movies at the box office in the UK in 1978 and was considered a financial hit in some major overseas markets. But does that mean it was any good? I saw it in the Market Hall cinema, I liked it a fair bit at the time, and I can tell you in summary it's a decent bang for your buck action picture from the late 70s. Believe me, there's a lot to recommend it. However, it's not without its problems and issues, and it hasn't aged especially well. Subscriber Lee Taylor suggested it as a suitable candidate for review, which just so happened to coincide with a point in time when I'd been thinking about watching it again. So let's crack on. By the second half of the 70s, big movies were getting what was termed blanket release in the UK. What this meant was more prints of the film doing the rounds, so they landed in the provincial cinemas just shortly after being sprung on the cities. Us losers in the sticks no longer had to wait on big new releases. On the one hand, this was good news. It always pissed me off how long it took to clap eyes on the latest stuff. However, progress giveth with one hand, and poketh you in the eye with the other. For me, it meant that my local movie vendor revised its fabulously eclectic and bountiful program policy. Whereas previously I could hit 3 double bill sessions in a week if I wanted, this was hacked to sometimes just one main picture. So some weeks my potential for gorging on 6 movies frittered down to only 1, particularly if it was a major release screening over 7 days. Worse still, if it proved extra popular, it was held over for another week, or even 2, like Grease was, which I went to see, despite my intense dislike of musicals, because it was the only show in town at the time. So my golden days of overindulging in movie overload were coming to an end, and PTSD was biting due to the grisly trauma of having to watch cinema I normally wouldn't have touched with a 30-foot lightning rod and a laser telescope. Bastard! My point in telling you this is, I suppose, I actually got to see The Wild Geese in 1978, the year it was released. In fact, the month it was released, and it wasn't on a double bill. There was no supporting feature, I just got the main attraction and nothing else. It was a sign of changing times, pilgrims. Cast-wise, this had an impressively polished curb appeal. Richard Burton was headlining, along with Britain's highest-paid male actor of the decade, Roger Moore. Add to the top slots Richard Harris and Hardy Kruger, and his star looked like a golden ticket. Supporting the 4 focal stars was a raft of mainly British character actors. Stuart Granger, Patrick Allen, Barry Newman, Jack Watson, Kenneth Griffith, Ronald Fraser, and Frank Finlay. There was no shortage of star power or acting talent on display here. Originally, my old mate Michael Winner was slated to direct, but Lloyd was unhappy with this choice and opted instead for Andrew V. McLaglen, who was best known as a director of westerns, including several with John Wayne. Screenplay was penned by Reginald Rose, who had scripted the classic jury drama 12 Angry Men. The score was provided by the ever-reliable Roy Budd, augmented by an original theme song, Flight of the Wild Geese, written and performed by Joan Armatrading, and played over the opening and closing credits. And cinematography fell to Jack Hildyard, who had worked with David Lean, snagging an Oscar for The Bridge on the River Kwai, and Alfred Hitchcock. All in all, a solid setup. How did it work out then? Well, like this. The narrative sees rootless, hard-drinking former British Army Colonel Alan Faulkner, Richard Burton, as a mercenary for hire. He's approached by silver-headed oil-slick-on-legs Sir Edward Matheson, Stuart Granger, to undertake a mission in a fictitious South African state, the rescue of deposed President Julius Limbani, South African actor, playwright and rights activist Norman Nchona. Limbani is being held by military dictator General Ndofa and is awaiting execution. Ndofa's fearsome troops, the Simbas, are guarding finding him in a remote prison camp. Deal is thus: Faulkner assembles a team, comes up with an extraction plan, flies in, liberates Limbani, flies him out. Easy. Well, best laid plans and all that. Faulkner recruits reluctant old compadre and single-parent Captain Ray Fajanders, Richard Harris, a military tactician, planner and strategist. They rope in ex-Irish Guards officer and skilled pilot Lieutenant Sean Finn, Roger Moore. Finn brings along Pieter Coetzee, Hardy Kruger, a former Boer soldier with the South African Defence Force. They interview and recruit a bunch of old ex-comrades and younger wannabes, which notably include RSM Sandy Young, Jack Watson, who is going to whip the squad into shape by shouting at them a lot, threatening to kill them.
Any man here steps out of line and I will kill him stone dead.
And kicking ass.
Please, screaming faggot! Move it before I show up your arsehole!
Oh, God in her infinite wisdom had never ordained that.
Medic Arthur Whitty, Kenneth Griffith, a very out-of-the-closet homosexual, and Sergeant Jock McTaggart, Ronald Fraser, a man with a more stereotypical Scots name than Hoops McDuff, who just likes to fight with weapons or without. They're mostly a bit long in the tooth for this sort of rumpus, but they're part of a game bunch of 50 souls with little to lose, but they're not exactly inspiring civilian lives. Just as well, as it turns out. They train, they've got a plan for infill and exfil, and off they fly, parachuting in on Christmas Day, and so begins the festivities. Phase 1 goes well, one half violently infiltrate the prison camp and bust Limbani out, the other half secure the nearby airfield. Limbani's not a well man, but hey, at least he's on the way to freedom. Then General Endofer offers the duplicitous Matheson copper mining rights, which he readily accepts, and promptly cancels the extraction flight, betraying and stranding our boys in hostile territory with no possible exit option. Looks like they're fucked, oh yes indeed. On the run through dangerous bush country, the best kind, pursued relentlessly, the squad are shot at, blown up, whittled down. The makeshift objective is to reach Limbani's home village in the hope of inspiring a rebellion, but when they get there, they find the locals to be about as much use in a fight as a herd of dead warthogs. The local missionary priest, Father Geoghegan Frank Finley, isn't exactly welcoming.
Don't call me father, you murdering pig.
Ah yes, your typical godly greeting there, ideally heartwarming for the festive period. However, he informs of an ancient Douglas Dakota aircraft nearby that could be used as a means of escape. In a last-ditch escape bid and climactic battle, the plane is secured and 13 of the original 50 make it out alive. Limbani snuffs it from gunshot wounds in the process. So, well, it was all one big disastrous waste of time and life. You can't really put a positive spin on an outcome like that. Back in Britain, Faulkner seeks revenge and recompense, achieving both with terse Burton-like style and finesse. That's the basics. A fair enough plot for an action-adventure movie. Nothing wrong with it in those terms of reference. But there are pros and cons. First, the good stuff. McLaglen brings a Western movie aesthetic to the proceedings. It's a big game of cowboys being chased by Indians wrapped up in a contemporary framework. And this is no bad thing in and of itself. The action is at times satisfyingly ferocious, efficiently executed and captured on screen. Plenty of explosions and gunfire. The narrative has just enough character development so that you care about what happens to most of the key players. Acting is as good as it needs to be considering the script content and subject matter. Burton probably gives the best performance on show, but Moore, Harris and Kruger aren't that far behind. Shakespeare it ain't, but then it ain't supposed to be. However, there are some memorable and quotable lines, Burton impressively raising the profile of the dialogue. The relationship dynamics between him, Harris and Moore blend in especially well. Kruger feels like a bit of an outsider, but maybe he's supposed to be that way. Cinematography is eye-catching, lovingly capturing the sweep and scale of the locations and framing the pyrotechnics accordingly. There's a nice hint of the epic about it. Armour Trading's theme song is a lyrical, haunting and memorable composition, and Bud Score does his job well enough. Much of the film constitutes a crowd-pleasing, visually and sonically solid, escapist entertainment package. Now the stuff that's not quite so good. There's a lot of signposting as to the prospective fate of the characters. Harris has a young son, Emile, and I took an instant dislike to the sickly whippersnapper as soon as I clapped eyes on him. What a poncy little shit. Clearly represents an omen of doom. You know Harris isn't going to make it as soon as he asks Faulkner to promise to take care of the pasty little boarding school oik should his clock get punched. Sure enough, Burton shoots Harris himself rather than let him be captured and tortured by the enemy. It's the only way. Personally, I'd prefer to take my chances with the Simbas, but when Dick Burton decides to shoot you, shot is what you get. Some more signposting when Burton turns up at Jack Watson's house to pitch him the job. Watson's wife reacts with fear and hostility as if the four horsemen of the apocalypse had just wheeled up to sell her old man a life insurance policy. Clear sign RSM Sandy Young is headed for that great army boot camp in the sky. Kenneth Griffith camps it up shamelessly as the squad medic Whitty. It's a screamingly over-the-top caricature of a gay man, and whilst it may be comically amusing and entertaining, even at the time of release it was clear to see how some might take offence. Whilst I don't think that the gay community these days would be unduly troubled, no more than I would be watching John Ford's How Green Was My Valley and his portrayal of the Welsh, the Snowflake Cancel Culture Club would no doubt have a rabidly apoplectic meltdown on their behalf. Whitty's sacrificial death scene, firing bullets and crude sexual innuendos at attacking Simbas, is so jaw-droppingly politically incorrect you'll either laugh at or recoil from it.
My, just look at you big bastards.
But look on the bright side, the theme song is by a black lesbian artist, an example of early woke and inclusive, which although was more likely by accident than design, might help to even things out. Yeah, probably not then. Roger Moore and Richard Harris seem to be playing each other's roles. Moore, an Englishman, is Sean Finn, an ex-Irish Guards officer. Harris, an Irishman, is Ray Fajanders, an English military strategist. What the thinking was here is anyone's guess, and it's always remained a bit of a puzzle to me. Nothing wrong with casting against type as such, but the rumour has it that Rog was too popular with the audiences of the time to kill his character off. He was James Bond, after all, so the roles got swapped out. How true this is, I can't definitively say, but it feels a reasonable explanation. There's a lot of time spent on the setup before the action kicks in, like some background stuff about a contract being taken out on Finn for the killing of a drug dealer. Rog makes him eat a bag of heroin. He can do cold kills, can Rog. Faulkner and Janders move in to protect him whilst Matheson applies pressure to have the contract lifted. This is fine, dealt with without too much lag, and does serve to depict the relationships between the three men. The recruitment and training sequences do tend to drag on a bit though. They're reasonably absorbing, but the preamble to mission time, the point when things really start to move in the action stakes, would have benefited from being a bit leaner and slicker. Now comes the heavier political stuff, which does bog proceedings down. Hardy Kruger plays a white South African who isn't shy about his use of offensive racial slurs when communicating with Limbani. I guess Kruger, one of the few participants still alive today, aged a sprightly 93, had a more unique insight into racism and bigotry than most. Age 13, he was a member of the Hitler Youth in his native Germany. Anyhow, he was critical of McLaglin's handling of these scenes, arguing he lacked the directorial nuance and skills to do them justice, and they are indeed heavy-handed and to some extent poorly judged. Kruger's character carries the ailing Limbani on his back, saving his life in the short term, and comes to develop an understanding and respect for the man, but it's all very clunky and unsubtle, and just doesn't ring true. No bad idea to portray systemic racists as seeing the light, recognising the error of their ways, yet this is way too glib and easy, like, oh wow, I suddenly get it now, what a dumb racist jerk I've been all my life, this man is my country's saviour, a few philosophical platitudes from him and I'm cured. That's not generally how it works. Kruger, who on reflection was maybe embarrassed by the language his character uses and the sentiments he expresses, felt that he should have been seen to simply listen to Limbani rather than engage in badly scripted ideological discourse, and I can understand why. At the time I can't say I was unduly bothered, but nowadays I admit to finding it a little indigestible. That said, it's a part of film history and I would be the last person to want to change it. Denying history, censoring it, deleting it, is a moral crime against humanity, I think. Learning from it, however, is divine, and we should all aim to do that. Why? So that we don't repeat it, you dumb cat. Location shooting in South Africa landed the Wild Geese in controversy. The apartheid regime was in full swing at the time, presided over by a predominantly racist white government. There were protests by anti-apartheid campaigners at initial screenings before anyone had actually seen the film. Lloyd attempted to counter to some extent, circulating positive reviews and reports from the premiere, which took place in the black South African township of Soweto. This was interpreted as a stage-managed and insincere exercise in deflecting critique. And honestly, criticisms of how some of the black characters are portrayed are not without some legitimacy. Taking everything into consideration, what's the bottom line? Well, if you can put to one side the leaden, simplistic and misguided political elements and racial stereotyping, if you can remind yourself it's only a movie, a fiction, a fantasy, and rein in any easily offended knee-jerk sensibilities you may have, then you've got a classy, well-made action-adventure flick that rewards attention with some thrilling and suspenseful moments. The cast is great and and you won't see their like again. The pace once it gets going is quite intense, and the on-screen showpieces are tremendous. Plus, there were instances of some emotional gravitas, mostly due to Burton's actions and reactions. He made so many awesomely bad films in his career, it's easy to forget just what an accomplished screen actor he really was. His beautifully delivered confrontation speech with Matheson at the end is a chilling and compassionate reminder. I, for one, am not going to apologise for liking The Wild Geese. It's flawed, sure, but then what isn't? I can understand any number of given reasons why someone wouldn't like it, but then there's no law that says you have to watch it. So the easy option is right there. If you don't want to, don't. It's clear that Ewan Lloyd pulled out all the stops in an attempt to craft a classic of the genre, and he very nearly succeeds. All of the basic ingredients are in situ, and it's certainly worth the time and attention of most action junkies. But ultimately, Rose's script misfires in certain areas where it perhaps should not have gone in the first place, and McLaglen's limitations as a director are in part highlighted by going to those areas along with it. But there you go, and there you are. Thank you for your time and attention. If you feel so inclined, you can hit like, don't like, subscribe, leave a comment, all down to you, amigo. I'm happy whatever, for the world has not heard the last of me. Threat of the day. Meanwhile, here's a song called I'll Just Run Through This. For no particular reason. Well, apart from annoyance at Adele releasing yet another bloody breakup album. I mean, how many more? Are Fanny's gonna drop out at this rate, for crying out loud? If you'll pardon the expression, you're all fucked. If that sounds like indiscretion, well, hard luck. If the truth is something you don't like, consider unappealing. Well, the news ain't that much better. Facts don't care about your feelings. You got a diva on the radio, her 89th relationship has failed. She's gonna tell you all about it once again. Fake agony and pain with piano. And I'll just run through this because the song remains the same as the other 30 odd that came before. And I can't pedicure it anymore. Just have to face the facts, and that's it. If denial blows your stack, well, tough shit. If what's real doesn't suit your taste, offensive arbitrator. Well, believe in what you want to, it won't change the laws of nature. You got a diva on the internet, her 89th relationship has failed. She's gonna tell you all about it once again. Fake agony and pain with piano. And I'll just run through this because the song remains the same as the other 30 odd that came before. Can you really pedicure it anymore? It is what it is and will remain as is, though you may not want it to be so. The rest is propaganda or a fantasy, and anyway no one believes it's something you don't know. Got a diva in the video, her 89th relationship has failed. She's gonna tell you all about it once again. Fake agony and pain with piano. And I'll it's the other 30 of the game before. Do you really wanna do it